Hello again, once again, everyone. Welcome back to the Friday Laser Jams. As you can see, I am very much not Lev. Lev is away from the office today, so he has left the hosting duties very generously to me. I think he may be stepping in for me next week on the Wednesday stream. So you can head over to the Wednesday stream next week, same start time, same show place, same show channel, and you can let them know how I did. I would very much appreciate that. We have kind of a smaller crew this week, but not to worry. We have a fantastic guest to make up for the fact that I think Mike will be joining us in a little bit. And at the moment, we still have the man, the expert, the James in the van. Mr. James Minchow, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing fantastic. Best day ever.
I do look forward to these Fridays. I always think too, you have this beautiful brick background behind you, and I can't help but think of school picture day when I was a kid. That was always the background that I would, exactly, yeah, see? That was the background and the pose that I would typically go for. Very importantly, though, is our guest today, joining us all the way from Belgium, if I'm not mistaken.
Definitely, thank you for having me.
Yeah. Oh, very, very pleased to have you here. We're very lucky that you could join us. Would you be willing to maybe introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about what you do and maybe a little bit of your history with Trotec lasers.
Okay, so I'm Thomas, obviously from Belgium. I am a craftsman since 7 years now. So I started really late, but still okay. My craft is a side job. So I have a full-time job during the week, but I work on that on my hobby. I started with a hobby a couple of years ago, and I started as a square sawer, a manual square sawer. And then I discovered I was looking for a CNC machine, and we have a couple of fab labs in Belgium. So I ran into one, and they had a Chinese laser cutter, and I was really intrigued about the precision, the speed of that machine, and what you can achieve with that. Things I couldn't dream of with the manual square sewing. And so I started to dig into the laser business, and I benchmarked a couple of brands, and then I decided to go with Trotec last year, and I started my company last year. So the project itself is really new, but I have a couple of years experience in woodworking for that.
Wow. Yeah. Can I ask, I know James is something of a woodworker himself in his off time. How did you...
off time.
Well, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, exactly, yeah.
When you have a laser in your van, I guess it's tough to find off time. Technically, it's kind of...
I did it to myself.
By the way, we have a lot of lovely people joining us in chat. If you will drop us a hello in chat, we're always very happy to see you. Sergio watching from Portugal, thank you so much for tuning in. Saludos from Mexico. Clifford, hello. Good to see you. Good to see you all again.
Bienvenidos.
Let me ask you, Thomas, how did you get started with woodworking? Was it something that was always a passion of yours, or was it something that...
No. It came when I was in high school, in university. I drew, I mean, a lot of people draws in the margin of the courses, you know, and I did a lot of mandalas to that day, and I wanted to bring that one step further, and so I was looking for a creative hobby, etc. What can you do with your stuff? And then my roommate at that time gifted me for Christmas my first manual square saw, so you know, the U-shape saw. And I started to do that in my room in the flat we shared. And then and I show on Facebook the thing I did. So I did a necklace for friends and so on. And people get really hyped by that. And I was really surprised that things that to my judgment were crap. People got really, really enthusiastic with that. And so I thought that, well, maybe there is a thing to it. Maybe I can bring that further. And so very slowly, very organically, I got experience. I tested myself. I get out of my comfort zone. I tried and errors a lot. and then I'm where I'm today, and I'm really happy about it because I don't pressure myself to move quickly, but every step is a victory. Obviously, if James is a kind of woodworker, he knows that you fails a lot, but when you success, you know that you don't have to come back to where you were before. You can move forward always.
Yeah, when the joint clicks together.
Yeah, the satisfaction with that is just
tough to beat.
For sure.
I'm more intrigued by the idea of, you know, everything is quiet in the flat, and then just very faintly in the distance from Thomas's bedroom, you hear the like.
Yeah, it was, and I have to say that the computer don't like a lot the wooden dust. It's not.
This is something we have to deal with very frequently here, I will have to say.
And when the work was done, I thought I was a beaver because you have that wood smell in the room for a couple of days, and it was very. It was an interesting time.
Is this sort of an indication? So, is this video we're watching right here sort of a good example of what the typical work for that time period in your creativity would look like?
That was my first logo, and it was on the first scroll sewing machine I got. And I have to say, I am where I am today because I have tons of friends who supported me through the time. And for my 30th birthday, I did a money gathering. I did my first show. I showed the thing I did by hand, and I wanted to buy my first machine, and I wanted to buy a good quality machine that can bring me several years along.
Right.
And so that's the time lapse with the cutting of that logo.
Wow. And how long did this logo take you to do with the scroll saw?
I think because that is MDF, so the wood is really, really easy to cut. And I think at that time it was maybe 1 hour and 20 minutes to cut.
Wow. And then what would that be on your laser?
I think on because the logo has changed since that.
Okay, gotcha.
It's more complicated today, more woody. And I think now if I have to cut it, it will take less time to cut it than to glue it on the board. Because I have several pieces to bring together.
I have to say, I don't mean to contradict you, but in saying that this is easy and in watching you do it, I would very respectfully disagree that I think this is easy because you have a talent for it and you've practiced. I think one of the things I love best about the laser is it allows me to turn around projects that I would never have the manual dexterity to be able to do, you know, by any means. Through sort of, you know, a manual way.
And it requires also a lot of patience, and it's not my strong suit, I have to admit. But it's
Oh,
for the precision, the laser is unbeatable for the manual working.
Well, so I have to ask. You mentioned sort of a very gradual increase in the sort of gosh, what's the word I'm looking for? And how refined your tools have become, sort of from one to the next to the next. So from the manual scroll saw to the scroll saw machine, and now to the laser. Yeah. Does it still feel like a natural progression? Has your sort of workflow for how you conceptualize a project still stayed pretty much the same, or, you know, what does that look like?
I think that
you hand drew that logo. It looked like.
Yeah, if I to go from what you said, I would work the way I'm working today with the laser if I was still working manually.
Wow.
I think not. I think it would be very different because my drawing today are very sketchy. It's just doodle. I mean, if I have on my desk here.
I could perhaps show in here from your instrument.
Yeah, that's a good example here. I doodle on the train when I go to the office, and for instance, if I doodle this, here, if I had to do it manually, like wood burning or something else,
Right.
that doodle should become something very more precise before going into production. Now, when I doodle something like that, I scan it and I put it on Illustrator. I refine everything with the tools of Illustrator, so I can't vectorize it directly because pen is not working properly for the vectorizing process. But I take the feather, the pointer tool, and then I redo the shapes, and then I know that job control can take care of the rest.
Right.
And so I just have to select my wood, select my size, my power and speed, and go into process. So the approach is very different. What I do is a lot of doodling on paper, and then when I'm happy with the result on the paper, I move into Illustrator. If I was working manually, it will take more time on the paper and more time with the tools.
Right. I see.
Some of the best work I've seen out there in the world starts from somebody who sketches what they want to see first, and then they ink it in, and then they scan it in, and then they digitize and refine in a vector workspace, and it really shows. You can always tell who's drawn it first because it's so unique and so new. And I tell this to a lot of my customers. And what would you say to those people who maybe aren't great artists and, aren't, maybe they have the passion for laser cutting and engraving, but maybe they're just, they just can't do the art part. What would you say to someone like that?
Well, I'd say that as long as you have a strong idea, that is the resource to bring you along for the project. So if your idea is precise, but you don't have I never learned to draw, for instance. I doodled a lot, and then I got the Gothic shape, I got the Arabic shapes and so on, and now I can merge everything together. But as long as in your mind, you know what you want to achieve, then you can move along. And if it doesn't matter if you can't draw it, I think it's just it just take maybe longer to achieve that, but you can still do it.
Don, you should bring up Justin's stuff.
Hi, Mike.
Hi, guys.
I was gonna say,
hey,
yeah,
Mike.
I snuck in.
Yes. Thank you so much for coming in, Mike. Good to have
Good
you.
to see you.
Late. I had a guy walk in looking at a system. Show them Justin's stuff because that's how he did it. His stuff, right? Remember?
Yes, absolutely.
Student?
When he came in, let me pull that up for you.
He came in, he didn't even know how to use a computer, but he could draw like it was a great drawer.
Unreal,
beautiful stuff. So, and then by the time he left here, he was pretty good at the computer too. So
that's true.
It was just a high school student that was here just on co-op. So
cool.
See if I can search up.
Maybe we should start offering drawing lessons now too.
Exactly.
This is one.
I think one good tip should be that if the project is too complicated or the task is foreseen too big to be achieved, you can always crack it into a smaller task, a smaller piece of that problem, and every problem. You can find a solution to almost every problem. So if the problem is the drawing, simplify the drawing, learn how to draw, and then you can move along. If the computer part is too big or too complicated, get some help and try to understand every bit of the process, and then you can have the whole picture and you can move forward with that.
I absolutely agree. This was a project, as Mike is saying, where this student hand illustrated each of these individual layers of sort of the musculature in the hand from a photo, and then he's saying sort of vectorize the actual hand itself to see if we've got any of the drawings themselves in here, but there are some of them. In order that he could create sort of a multi-layered effect when you were shining light through the reverse of it, and you could sort of stack them together. But I absolutely agree with you, Thomas. I think that applies to just about any I used to draw quite a bit when I was younger. And one of the biggest things that people would tell me is if you can't draw like hands, for example, don't just try to draw hands over and over and over again. Try to learn how to draw, a finger. Try to learn how to draw, how does the finger connect to the palm? And then how does the palm connect to the thumb? And then, build out slowly, right?
Mm-hmm.
The very first thing that you do, probably won't be maybe exactly what you had intended, but as long as you're learning along the way, then each one gets kind of incrementally better and better and better, right?
Yeah.
I mean, kids out there, listen, practice drawing. I mean, if your business is art, of course, and the industrial guys, maybe you don't have to do it so much, but if your business is like, if you have an Etsy business or something like this, and you're right now you're satisfied with doing some, taking some art from the internet somewhere and maybe digitizing a picture, that's a great place to start. But I think it's really rewarding to be able to draw your own stuff, and then refine and maybe it won't look good the first few times, but keep going, because it really, really does look good. And Thomas's work there is definitely a great example of somebody who's done that.
For instance, last November, I didn't know how to draw a Celtic knot in interlace. It is very intricate work, and to me it was amazing. I couldn't understand where to start. And today, luckily, we have a full library. I mean, it's Alexandria library digitally on the internet. So you can search for everything, you will find it. And I found on YouTube a couple of tutorial with pencil and paper how to understand the basic on the Celtic knot. And now I can just take a white paper and just start to draw. And if I'm not happy, I'll just scrap it. So it's really, it just takes time, and you have to be dedicated to what you do, and then you will achieve almost everything.
I think that's great advice. I think also that you are a great example of how this is something. So if you'll indulge me for a moment, we do a stream every Wednesday where I work with one of our very talented designers.
Yeah, I saw the last two of them.
Yes, and he is given that sort of task to try and design something within an hour, right? Which is an incredibly hard task. But the thing that we talk about so often is that skill of creative problem solving. No matter what medium you're working in, I think those skills kind of apply across the board.
True.
That, you know what I mean? When you're learning how to build something as simple as a box from wood, let's say, for example, years ago, you might not have maybe known it, but you were sort of accidentally, from a box like this one, like this beautiful, like jewelry box, this chest, eventually comes to inform, like a more complex project, like the board game project you were telling us about, where it's sort of like a very intricate, built-in piece.
But
right?
the hinges to that box is inspired from the jewelry box.
Really?
Cool.
Yeah. So if you see, no, you don't see that on the biggest one, but the hinges are hidden in the dracar's head.
Wow.
And then and I put some veneer on the top to hide the mechanism. But I took the jewelry box and I just expanded to the size of my board game, and then I put the mechanism hidden with the veneer. But the mechanism is just the same. It's just applied to another project, to something new.
Wow. But imagine, like Mike and James, you guys must find that as well to some degree, right? That the experience you have in helping customers solve problems in trying to find a way to optimize something or do something with their laser, that very typically you might sort of learn a trick with a particular material or a particular way of processing something that maybe 2 months or 6 months later or 2 years later, you're able to say, oh, what actually works great for this is X, right? This kind of thing.
It's true.
I mean, I know that we often get similar questions about how to treat certain materials, and I'm very grateful to have had these laser jam sessions where we've gotten to talk with guests about the secrets and tips and tricks that they have, and I, secretly write them down and steal them all. And then on top of that, also, the wisdom of guys like Mike and James to help. Like, one of the questions I know that we got, and I was going to pull up later, is about engraving and cutting wood on a laser without burning it. And so I absolutely wanted to ask Thomas about sort of your experience in processing wood specifically with a laser, because it's not easy.
It's one of the questions I have for you guys, because
Oh, really? Great.
Yeah, because I saw the webinar with the matrices for the speed, power, and out of focus, and so I took the time to encode everything into jump control, and I did a test, and it failed, and I think I spent almost 2 hours on that without cracking it, because I did the first one was the power test. So for the people viewing this video, the matrices, you put the power test to make sure you don't burn the surface of the wood. If the power is too high, you will burn everything. And then you have the speed. But if you are running, if I understand correctly, if you run a power test, the speed is the same for everything. And if you do the speed test, the power is the same. And I did the power test first, so I saw the power that was not burning my wood, and then I put that power into the speed to check if the wood was cut or not, and the wood was not cut with the slowest speed possible. So I had the power of 21. It was for a cherry veneer, and so I had to increase my power, but then it was slightly burned, and I don't know how to work around. So that was one of my questions for you guys today.
Okay, I'm glad. I am going to hand that off to these two gentlemen because they would know far better than me. I'm just going to show our material settings video that you referenced here in the background. You can find it on our YouTube channel. But guys, is there anything you could recommend in terms of, how to approach that? That's a tricky problem.
You want to take this one, Mikey?
Yeah. Are you cutting, or are you engraving, or is it both, Thomas?
First, I was interested to cut.
Yeah, I think you're always going to get. It depends on the wood you're working with. I mean, this is always the question that comes up, and it's a bit of a hard one because some people work with a finished piece of wood, where you've got a varathane on there, and then other people work without a finished piece, and then you've got nothing on there. And it depends on the thickness you're working with, and invariably you're going to get some staining on the machine. How much you are on the material, how much you get is going to be dependent on the thickness, the type of wood that you're working with. You can mask it. I mean, we went through that this week, with masking. But again, some people, that's an extra cost and everything like that. You got to, peel off the excess, which normally isn't a big deal. Once you've cut it. So, typically what a lot of guys will do is they'll cut this out and then they'll just take a little sanding pad, with a fairly light sandpaper on it, like a grit, and then just do a quick sand around, because really all you're doing is staining the edge. Now, if the material is sealed, where you put your varathane on there or whatever, normally any of the residue is just going to wipe off with a damp cloth. Okay. Right. So again, you can try it. You could try 2 or 3. You could try a couple of passes if you want. What thickness were you cutting? Like 3 mil or 6 mil or 3 mil? Yeah. 3 mil is not too bad. You can go over it twice if you want to try that. I think the thing to remember a lot of times is that it doesn't take any more time to do the job. Because you're just most of the time you can run twice as fast, right? So you're going to basically run 2 passes with half the power that it would take to go through in 1 pass. So which typically for most people means that they can run at 100% power. They can just double their speed, right? So a lot of times you can go through, it doesn't take any more time. So you might want to try that. Which machine you have, a 100 or a 300 or?
No, it's a 300, 80 watts.
Yeah, 80 watts. So
and the power that left the least residue was the highest was 21% power.
Yeah.
And I tried several speeds, but I didn't try the several passes.
You can try that. I mean, that's really the best way. And then the other thing is to keep your hertz at 1,000. You want to keep your maximum amount of peak power
Okay.
And that's at 1,000. Anytime you start to increase the hertz, then you end up lowering your peak power, which then sort of lowers some of that evaporation that will happen. Like when you hit it with the highest amount of power, then you're going to vaporize the material, and hopefully you'll have the least amount of staining, especially on your edge, right? So yeah, it's like I said, it's a tough thing, and certainly you could try. Do you have a 2-inch lens on there or 1.5-inch lens?
Yeah, a 2-inch. I've burned the 1.5.
Oh, you did.
Me too.
Yes, because the 1.5 would generate the smaller kerf.
Okay.
Right. So then that's going to generate a little less residue for you. So, but I mean, the 2-inch is still pretty good. But are you getting more staining on the top or the back? You should get more on the top than you do.
It was on the top. It was on the top.
Yeah. Which is what you're going to get.
The back normally doesn't stain. A lot of people think that the back stains, but on a 300 or something with a stainless bed, that staining on the back is actually just a burn. It's just a reflection from too much power.
You're running your air assist too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and you've got the coax,
with the cutting grid. So
and you've got the small nose cone. So I mean, you're doing everything you can there. I mean, the only problem, the problem that you've got when you have an air assist, which generates a lot of the residue that you have in some other application materials, is that air is blowing everything around.
Yeah.
Right. So you could, I mean, it really depends on where the staining is and how the staining is. Normally on wood, the air assist isn't going to affect anything. Mm-hmm. You could try, if you want, try it without air assist and see what happens, or have the air on a very minimal,
very low,
just to keep the lens clean, and try that and see what happens, right? And then run a couple of passes and see if it's going to be any cleaner.
That.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, it really is the issue. The other thing you could do is that if you use the links command in the software, when you are cutting out your smaller pieces in a big sheet, then you can take it out as one big job, right? And it's still connected on the full sheet. You might have a small link that holds all those pieces together. Then you can sand everything, as one big job. Yeah, and then you can just break everything apart once it's been sanded and everything like that. Again, that's another option to maybe try that too, if you are going to have to clean it, after the fact.
For the smaller piece, usually I take the necklace and I just sand it with
with the small
180 grit.
Yeah,
and do the thing.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of soap and water with wood, and especially for doing the 3D engraving, like the laser carving. After my part's carved and it's all 3D and it looks great, I'll take a pumice hand soap, and I'll just use a scrub brush and I'll scrub the whole thing with this pumice hand soap, and then just a really, really light, not even a rinse, but just a water on a cloth, and wipe it all off, and most of the resin comes right off, and it looks perfectly clean. And people come in and they see these things and they're like, well, how did you do that without burning? And of course, since I sell lasers, I kind of have to tell them. But if you were the person on your end, Thomas, you wouldn't have to tell them that the laser made it, because you really can't tell. You can't see there's any burn marks in the engraving, but that's what I do, is just soap and water.
I mean, I'm looking at the cutting here on the video. I think these are Thomas's video. I mean, that material is pretty damn clean. I mean, you're talking on the top, or you're talking on the side?
No. It was not for that. It was not for that one. The most mark I get, and but I can't help it because it's not a good wood quality. I get the 10 the 10 millimeters plywood comes from a wholesaler in my region.
Yeah,
and I think it's not adapted to the laser cutting. So the glue is really tough, and the wood is really tough in the middle of the plywood. So I needed, for the Musha's arch I made, I needed to make 2 passes at 97-95% power for that one, yeah. And that cleaning for the side burning was a total nightmare.
Yeah,
because it was so burned. The curve was almost 1 millimeter.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because the power was
so large. I mean, the other thing is you probably, at 10 millimeters, you should probably be using a 2.5-inch lens too, right? I mean, you could use a 2-inch lens, but if you're starting anything over, you start getting up into that type of thickness where you're getting almost 1/2 inch there. You really need, you should be going at a 2.5. So, but again, you can see in the video how clean that is. So again, that's why I say a lot of times it depends on, as Thomas is saying, it's the thicker stuff that he's having a real problem with. The thinner stuff is a
6
very clean
mil
cut.
That is 6 mil plywood, and I have absolutely no issue with my 80 watts to go through that in one pass.
Wow. So this,
I mean that you.
Sorry, go ahead, Mike.
No, I'm just going to say the kerf is really small on the cut there. So, I mean, there's very minimal residue there. So that's being generated. So
I really wanted to ask as well, because wood is one of the materials that, at least in my experience, we get the most questions about how to process. How important is, I believe, James, you touched on it perhaps just really quickly here as we were talking, but how important is ventilation, especially when working with wood?
It's huge. I mean, it's to me, it's like how important is electricity when using a laser? It's essential. I mean, without proper ventilation, you're going to get more flare-ups. You're going to get more smoke. You're going to get more dust. You're going to ruin your laser over time.
And your lungs.
Your lens, yes, your lens gets dirtier. Yeah, people will go out and they will spend, $20, $40, $60, $80,000 on a piece of equipment, and then they're trying to think of what the absolutely cheapest exhaust system they can get away with is, and it doesn't make sense. You go and get the most expensive exhaust system that you can afford. No, not that you can afford. The most expensive exhaust system, period, and make sure that it's working well and it's spec'd for your laser. Really look at the pressure and the CFM. A lot of people just look at the CFM and say, I got way more CFM than I need. It's 750 CFM, and the motor on it is about this big, and it might be moving that much power, but as soon as you give it some resistance, like plugging it into a laser, the motor's just cavitating. It's just spinning without moving air. And then you're left with dust swirling around your machine. And then it's nightmare town.
Well, and one of the things I think that's so important to remember is that in terms of ventilation, you do always have options, right? I mean, when it comes to wood in particular, I think you've always told me that venting it outdoors, if not necessarily through a Quattro or a filtered machine, might be the best way to go. Is that still true, would you say? Or
yes, yeah. I mean, I'm a big fan of the Atmos and the Quattro exhausts. They work fantastic, but there's certain products that is not ideal for, and wood is one of those products, especially MDF. You try to pull MDF, the glue sublimates and turns into a gas, and the minute it hits the filter media, it just turns back into plastic, and you're left with some plastic filters, and it's hard to keep the filters going. But in some cases, you don't have a choice. You just have to spend the money on the filters. If you can't vent outside, maybe you're in an apartment building or something like this, and you want to operate your machine with an exhaust. That might be how you have to do it, and then you just have to think about, your product might have to cost a little more because you're having to replace the filter media. So, but yeah, I mean, venting outdoors, if you can do it with wood, is ideal.
That was the recommendation I got from Trotec Belgium. It was I was interested to get an Atmos, and he told me what material will you work with, and I was answering mainly exclusively wood. And he told me, okay, forget the Atmos, because the invest you have to do each year for the filters will not be interesting. Your filters will be full within a month. You will have to change them to regularly. So he had advised me a venting system that was sold with the machine, and now I'm venting through the window, and it's working like a dream.
Great.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, the dust collectors typically are going to generate more static lift, and they're also going to generate more CFM. So, your only issue, the trade-off is that you're drawing air out of your room and then blowing it outside. That's the trade-off, whether you go with a filter versus the dust collector. But as you're saying, and if you're doing a lot of wood, you're blowing it outside, and really you don't see any smoke coming out of the pipe. All you really get is a bit of a smell, which typically just smells like a fireplace, right? So that's basically what you've got. So yeah, I mean, most of the time we're always saying that you should use a dust collector, but if you can't, then yeah, you're going to have to go to a filter system.
So I have to ask Thomas, and for anyone who's watching, I mean, Thomas has incredible.
It's amazing stuff. It's amazing job you do, Thomas. That's amazing.
I'm flying past it, but I've put his Instagram and Facebook handle here in the banner. So absolutely, you should check it out. Absolutely, you should. Yeah. Don't miss out, because it is fantastic. I was telling Thomas earlier that I basically spent my whole morning before the stream just sort of getting lost in watching these very short little time lapses.
Thanks.
And to stay one last time on the topic of the exhaust, please. Watching these videos, you don't see any smoke swirling around this machine.
That's a good point.
I mean, take a look at these videos, kids, because when you see this machine working, this is how a machine is supposed to work, without smoke. Like, it's producing smoke, but his exhaust system is definitely adequate, and it's pulling it out. If your laser machine isn't looking like his, get yourself some new exhaust. And we can help you try to pick one out. Call your local rep and ask them, what the requirements are. We'd be happy to help.
100%. I think, Thomas, you sort of got to touch on it earlier, but would you be able to tell us a little bit about how what sort of projects it is that you've been able to take on since obtaining the laser? Like, I know that you said you did this principally as sort of like the, it's not your main job, let's say your day job, but it seems that, although your style has kind of, grown and persevered throughout your work, it seems that, you're doing kind of much more elaborate pieces like that the Muka, the arch. I feel like you would probably never have attempted earlier when you're working, with hand tools.
The arch was a very particular project, because it was for a friend, so she's a photographer. She's a professional photographer, and like me, she moves like, first it was a hobby, a passion, and then organically she moved into something more professional. And it was very challenging, and I like to be challenged, to go out my comfort zone. So the projects today are more complicated, because I know that I can build on the foundation that was set 3-4 months from now, from more simpler project. Once I get that, I can move forward and make things more complicated. And those were coasters for a bar, and those killed my 1.5-inch lens.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
No, it is 1.5. Yep. That looks. There
because usually when I did engraving, a full board, I did one board and a half, and then before the next sheet, I cleaned the lens. And the bamboo resin was too thick, too sticky, and I was very surprised that it killed my lens that quick. So now after each sheet, that's a very good tip, guys, for those who are watching. When you engrave one full sheet of wood, don't try to push your luck and do a second one. Clean your lens and then run the second sheet.
You know what?
Don?
Yes, Mike?
Yeah, go back to the video where he was cutting those long rectangles. I think he was talking about the girl, the photographer girl. Yeah. Is that it?
Might not be this.
That was the Viking board game. Yeah.
Yeah. That one there? Yeah, this one here. So just pause it for a second.
Mm-hmm.
So Thomas, why did you? And I'm just gonna try. I'm gonna go somewhere else with this. And I'm not trying to. I'm just asking a question because this goes back to the cleaning issue, or the wood issue. Those you have those pieces butted up against each other, but it looks like you've got a double cut going on there because you're cutting the top piece, which is straight, and the bottom piece, which is straight. So my question is, why did you not share a line there?
Because that was a prototype, that was a mock-up.
Yeah.
And preparing the file very tight and optimized for the lasering process is, for me, time consuming because I don't have the experience to do it quickly.
Yeah.
And so when I do a prototype, I don't spend the time to optimize my process.
Yeah, and really what I was trying, so you can, where I'm trying to go here, and I'm not trying to, single you out, but you see here right there, that line, he's engraving twice on that line. So, and this is a really, really common problem that a lot of people have when they're, I'm sort of shaking my finger here. Sorry. This is a really common problem that people have. And this is really, I mean, if you go to plastic or you go to wood or whatever, this is a really problem where people do multiples and they stick things together and they get double lines cutting. And what they find with the double lines cutting is that this is really what generates a lot of that residue that people complain about when they're cutting stuff. So again, sometimes it's better to take a couple of extra minutes and get rid of those lines where they're overlapping each other, because one is it creates more material wastage, which then creates more residue, and it also just generates more time.
Waste.
So, again, I the common one is when I did the plastic engraving tutorial, where I was taking a bunch of 1x3s, and the most common thing is people will take a 1x3 and then they'll duplicate it, and then you get all these lines that start interacting or intersecting over top of each other, and then the common question is somebody says, well, it's really my edges are really melting and they're sticky and I'm getting a lot of debris and everything like that, and then you look at the file and you say, well, yeah, but you're going like this, and then you go to the next one, and then you get all these overlapping lines, and then you say to somebody, well, why didn't you just do this, with one big cut line and cut them all out? And the nice thing about that is that just faster and a lot less residue that's being generated by the actual laser machine when you're cutting. And I'm not trying to say what you did was bad.
Of course,
I just noticed it when you were cutting, and I thought, well, that's something to point out to people, that is one reason why you get that burning, is you just have that double line there. And you're just doing a prototype, which is fine. But if you're in production, then you would have.
The production one was very tight, and so I sticked in Illustrator everything, and I deleted one line over two.
Yep.
And then it was just one pass around, and
and that's perfect. And you know what I'm talking about. I'm pointing this out to people that this is a really common, just taking some of those little silly, simple steps can really allow you to speed your job up, but also to eliminate some of the residue and the burning and everything
and
maybe you getting from.
Burning from behind with this too, because when you cut sort of a virgin cut, most of the energy is being absorbed by the material. When you go over that line one more time, the line is not absorbing as much of the laser beam. Now the laser beam is allowed to pass through the cut and down. Now, if you haven't been cleaning under your bed and you've been cutting paper or wood or plastic in little tiny chunks, that laser beam now is burning because it's way out of focus. Those little chunks way down below the parts, and now you're lighting on fire these pieces of paper or pieces of wood. That's creating a lot of smoke. It's creating a lot of flame. And then if you're cutting acrylic and then you've got paper things down below there, well, now you've got little matches to light the acrylic gas on fire. And then you wonder, hey, why is there so many fires here? We have to keep as many virgin cuts as possible and not have these double lines, as Mike is saying.
Now, this is just sort of in a similar note, but I wanted to show this as well. This is not quite as defined as what Mike was talking about. Oh, good. I'm glad it froze there on this is a video we published just this week, and it just has to do with it's a little sort of tip or a hack on how you can nest really intricate pieces together. So it uses a piece of software called eCut that by doing just a couple of clicks, it allows you to really sort of truncate all the pieces of a complex cut together as close as possible. So it'll show here sort of in the video, but by no means do you necessarily have to do it this way. And obviously I think what Mike is talking about usually requires a bit of sort of manual sort of dexterity with the software to be able to, overlap lines perfectly and delete the extra line and that sort of thing. But for someone who's looking to take a design like this one and just sort of look to, get the most out of their material, for example, you can see how it sort of rearranges things so as to make them as close and tightly together as possible in order that you can save material and hopefully save time when you're cutting, something really intricate in particular.
And so these are add-on programs to Corel or Illustrator where they're actually a plugin. And, right. And the E3 guy, he's written a couple of really nice stuff and he's got some other stuff in there for, that I've used. And he keeps his stuff up to date too, which is sometimes that's a bit of a problem because as some of the as Corel goes from version to version, some of these add-in plugins typically will break down if they're not kept up, with the latest version of software. So again, he's one that keeps the stuff up to date. So and there are some other people too that do that. And again, there's some really neat add-on programs plugins that you can get with some of these programs that sometimes
we're losing Mike.
Will make your job a lot easier, as the net program does.
Yeah, we're hearing robot Mike. Thomas, yeah, when you're using programs. I wanted to ask you. It's a tradition that we typically ask people what the strangest or weirdest thing that they've ever engraved or cut with their laser was. But yeah. Have you worked specifically, like exclusively with wood? You've never done any other material in your machine?
No. And that was one of the question I received was from friends during that COVID situation. With your laser, you can work to make protections with acrylic, with etc.
Right.
And we were in lockdown for, I think, for 6 weeks already.
Right.
And I knew, because I'm following partner brands, partner companies who were already full production into that. And as I worked with wood exclusively before, to me, it would request first to get the material. It was tricky because lockdown and so on.
Yep.
Secondly, to do a bit of R&D, to know the material, to know how to work around. And then I didn't want to invest into that because I have my day job to take care of.
Of course.
And so I missed that train, basically. And I had to make the decision to say, well, that slot is already taken by others, and I don't fit that anymore, and it will be too difficult to make my room in that. So I will keep focused on my craft and leave others to that work. So exclusively, I'm working on wood.
I mean, that's pretty cool, though. I imagine Mike and James, you guys would know of customers who would have sort of a similar story, but I've never actually met someone who has sort of I don't know, who's a specialist. I want to say, like you said, you're a self-proclaimed craftsman, I think, right? I mean, like, if you look at the videos and stuff on your Instagram, I think that's a very earned title. Have you ever
for sure.
Have you ever thought about dallying into plastics or acrylics and sort of
no maybe one day I will do le liège cork. No?
Yeah,
Cork,
yeah.
Or paper, but I have most of my affinity goes with the wood for the look of it, for the warmth it brings, for the creativity I can work with, and I'm totally not into plastic, so
That's okay.
That's totally fair. Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's something about I don't know. Because I do a lot of work with our materials. I oftentimes get overwhelmed by just the variety of things that you can choose. But I feel like you could continue to work with wood for your entire life and never be able to see all the range of effects and amazing things that you can bring out of the material.
And that can also be a trap because in the first month I got my machine, I ran maybe 100 idea per day, like, oh, I want to do that. Oh, I want to do that. Oh, I will test that. Bookmark in wood. Oh yeah, great idea. Okay, let's do some. And then I spend tons and tons of hours doing some R&D and tests on the machine, etc. And I don't know where I got that tip, but it was very useful that if you spend too much abroad and you don't focus on several things, you lose yourself. It's like swimming first in the river and then you end up in the ocean without a boat, without nothing, and you keep swimming. But then you get tired and you achieve a great distance, but nothing concrete. And so I tried to gather myself and then to focus on what was appealing to me. And then I went back and I saw the doodling I did, and I was like, okay, now it's past the time I get ideas from other. I will take my original drawing and I will try from that. And that I'm moving forward from that. But yeah.
I think there are examples I can think of off the top of my head, but that restrictions can often breed creativity.
Yeah.
True. Yes, indeed. Every single time. Every time.
Yeah.
And not just in laser work. I mean, in any
everything
you have. Yeah, restrictions are great. I find that the people say, I'm going to get this laser, I'm going to do absolutely everything, and I say, okay, great, do everything, but not all at once, please.
Yes.
Find something that you enjoy doing first, and then make some money with it, and then something's going to fall on your lap that maybe either you enjoy more or that makes you more money.
Yes.
And you'll work your way into that. Yeah. I remember with my business, I started off doing everything. It was like, oh, this is bad. And you never got good at one thing, right? You never get good at one thing. And then I just switched to name tags, and I literally just did name tags forever. And not because I was really interested in name tags. I made myself interested in name tags because they were making me money. So it was, I fired all my customers and and switched to name tags. So it's a very interesting idea that, narrowing your focus can actually broaden your horizons.
And the limitation can also comes from the tools you are using. For instance, the arch to bring back that particular project
I'm going to show it again.
is 1 meter and 10 centimeter wide. That can't fit in the Speedy 360 at once. So I had to think, okay, do I work with another company that can do that in one piece, or do I challenge myself to try to make it fit inside my machine? And then I cut it into 6, and then I arranged the file, etc. And that taught me a lot. That now today I know that I can do massive things with 70 by 40 centimeters of workspace I can have in the 300.
Mm-hmm. I think one thing too that stands out from talking to you, Thomas, and sort of speaks to what James was addressing there is, if you're trying to do a little bit of everything, that is very admirable, but at the same time, there's a learning curve for each new thing that you're trying to do. True. So like if you learn how to do, like something very, very beautiful in wood, and then somebody asks you to do a project in plastic, you may have to relearn how to work with plastic because it's not going to be the same as working with wood. Or, you know, if you want to do a POP display as compared to a name tag or signage or whatever it is, right? Each time you're going to have to sort of, there's going to be a bit of a learning curve that comes along with doing something new. Whereas, you know, trying to really focus down on one individual type of thing can bring forth that mastery and a chance to sort of express yourself specifically, as you were sort of speaking to.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, you had another great question that you sent us about, I think it was about grayscale. And I was wondering if you would pose it to these guys, because I do not know the answer.
Yeah, it was because in job control, I have an issue when I try to engrave in relief mode. I don't get the estimate of time versus when you do this with the coloring system. So I can assign 70% to yellow, 40% of power to blue, etc., etc. The relief will be engraved, and if I ask several passes, it will be okay, but I don't get the estimate of time. And then it's tricky when I'm requested to make a quote, because I can't make the estimate of the cost for me and then to my customer when there is a relief mode. And I wanted to know if there is something in job control that I can switch to make that happen, or it's just something that is not developed. I don't know. I have that question.
Yeah, it's just not possible in relief mode. So
okay,
the workaround that I always use is that you find out what your setting is going to be for. Say you're doing some relief engraving in maple. You find out what your setting, your speeds, and your powers are, and then if you just engrave you put a black square the same size on job control without relief mode. Relief mode is going to be the same speed, and it's still going to engrave the same amount of area. So you just make a black square and you look in job control how long that black square is going to take. You figure how many passes you want to do, 3, 5, 7, times it by that, and then you've got your estimate. And it's a really quick way of doing it. It might not be completely accurate, but it'll be accurate enough to quote on, right? Mike, do you have any other suggestions?
Well, if it's a grayscale image, could you not just bring the grayscale image in and do the same thing?
Yeah.
And then just say how many passes is it going to be, and then go that route, right?
Then switch.
Certainly if you're running in relief mode, certainly if you're running if you're doing relief mode in wood, as James knows and we know, because what's his name? Remember, he cleaned all those 3D relief pieces, right?
Yes.
Is that it's better to do it in multiple passes than try to do it all in one big pass.
True.
Right, because it's a lot cleaner. So, and that's a good, that's a good indication too that, of why sometimes it's better to run things in multiple pass as opposed to one pass. And relief mode is a good example, where you're better to do it in 4 or 5 passes than just one big pass, because there's just too much contamination, too much burning, too much residue, so.
Yeah, I mean, and multiple passes also gives you it gives you a better what's the word, like depth of field, I guess you'd almost say. Like it every pass is going to accentuate the 3D-ness of your bas relief or bas relief that you're getting with the relief mode. So I never do it in one pass.
And remember too, and that's how I came. That's that's a long story, but that's how I realized that acrylic it goes white, but when you go out of focus, it goes clear, was because I was doing a relief job, and then I got like 3/4 of the way through, and then all of a sudden I look down and the thing is clear, and I all of a sudden put 2 and 2 together that I was out of focus and I was melting it, right? So again, if you're going really deep, you may have to refocus on a certain pass. Right, if you're going down deep enough, because then you're getting out of focus, right? So as Jimmy said, you may need to refocus at the 4th pass if you're doing 7 or 8 passes, right? So depending on how deep you're going in the material. So, because if you want to keep that detail, you may want to use a smaller lens which then gives you less depth of field. So as you start to progress through that image, you may need to be refocusing as you go down through that image to keep that fine spot size that you might want to have for the detail.
Okay, thank you.
I know we're coming sort of to the end here, but I had a couple of priority questions that I wanted to throw out there.
Okay.
Just one or two here that I thought were really good, and I wanted to get your opinions on. I have one here from Randy in Burlington, who says, when using a rotary and you have an hourglass shape to engrave, do you measure the widest radius of the object even though you aren't going to be engraving in that spot? Or I assume the rest of the comment is just that, or do you measure just the exact area where you plan to be engraving?
I mean, I engrave. I find where the logo is. If the logo is in a taper like this, here's the top of the logo here, the bottom of the logo here. I will measure. I'll split the difference and measure about halfway down, and that's where I'll measure. Because if you measure at the top radius, it's going to be big. If you measure at the bottom radius, it's going to be small. Right. And then if you only measure at the extremes, your art is going to look skewed. But if you measure right in the middle, then you'll look a little bit skewed on top and bottom. But for the most part, the engraving will look normal, standard. So I would split the difference and measure your diameter where the middle of the logo or the middle of the art is going to be.
That makes sense. One more quick one, and forgive me, I think Mike just had to step out. He's a very busy fellow. I think it's one of these, like, if you come in fashionably late and leave sort of,
fashionably early.
You know what I mean? You seem like you must be in high demand. I'm going to come out and find him eating grapes in the lunchroom. I use laserable leatherette almost exclusively for my business, and my current laser deposits a lot of smoke and particulate that need to be cleaned from each piece. I imagine that Alan from Sarnia was just asking specifically, so, what suggestions might you have if working with a laserable leatherette?
I did leather once, and the smoke is really thick. Yeah,
it's a really tough one.
Yeah.
And it's the laserable leatherette, which they're meaning it's a fake leather, a faux leather, plastic.
I think.
Yeah, and he says laserable, which means it's probably not vinyl. We're hoping it's not vinyl anyway.
Always be careful. Leather's a tricky one.
Leatherette isn't almost always vinyl, so if he's got a laserable one, let's just assume it's the
100%. It does.
Yeah. So it's depositing a lot of smoke. Now, is it smoke or is it dust? Right.
It says smoke and particulate.
Yeah. So I would put your large nose cone, the large mouth nose cone on. Turn your air assist down when engraving, so that it's just a light breath of air, just enough to protect the lens, as Thomas knows, and then try engraving that way, because it might be taking the dust and pushing the dust. And especially with leatherette, the dust is going to be kind of like a molten plastic for a tenth of a second. And so if your air assist is blowing this molten dust back down onto the part, you're going to get it. It's going to stick down on top, and it's going to look like burning, or it's going to look like a smoke residue. And so that's one option that I would say. Mike, did you get that question?
I think I did. Sorry, I got kicked out, and then I had to come back in again.
That's okay.
My turn.
So Alan was asking.
I guess the one thing you could, if you can go from the bottom up, sometimes that may help. Where you're progressing from the bottom and then you're going back that way. Sometimes it depends on your exhaust too. Sometimes I've seen where somebody has too much exhaust, and then it almost becomes laminar. Where it actually is going almost along the material. Sometimes you might be better to back the exhaust off a little bit so that it's not going straight. It might kind of be going on an angle like this, as opposed to right along the material. Because sometimes what happens is when you're drawing air through like that, you're creating static electricity. right? So then the material now is attracting the actual dust too, right? So and you've
And
got
leatherette
air.
might be
Yeah.
just the thing to attract static electricity too.
Yeah, and you may want to
Interesting.
just back off the air a little. The actual draw of the exhaust. I don't know what he's got for exhaust or anything like that. So yeah.
These were priority questions that were submitted at the link you see scrolling across the bottom of the screen there. If you guys want to ask us priority questions to have Mike and James answer them in the future and me potentially answer them incorrectly, then by all means, please do submit them. We would appreciate that. Once again, I wanted to thank Thomas so much for joining us. James, are you scrolling the priority thing across the bottom of the screen?
I'm trying, buddy. I'm trying to hurry it along, get it into the people's brains.
I wanted to thank Thomas so much for joining us today. Again,
Thank you for having me.
Facebook.
Thanks, Thomas. Great stuff, man.
Yeah, really good stuff. Very
see.
impressed.
One last little question for you. I was curious about the
thumbs
name. Where did the name Enchantourneur come from?
It comes from the French name of the craft I started with. So scroll sewing in French is chantournage.
Okay.
And so the guy who is doing the chantournage is a chantourneur.
Okay.
And I wanted to make a pure of word with enchanted.
Yeah.
Like
cool.
the drawing I do mixing Gothic, Celt, Arabic, Asian stuff is kind of my world.
Right.
And I wanted to make something like
That's really cool.
Thanks.
I like it.
Because I recognize the Chantourneur, but I was wondering, I was like, is there something?
Yeah, it's a kind of pun of word, and I got a benchmark test with a couple of friends and teachers from my school, and I thought it was a very good idea. Because my target is both local but global in the end. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Great.
Well, listen.
And it was not taken because
That's a tricky one.
That's
Yeah.
also the big one. Yeah, it's a ticket
Yes.
on the internet. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So thank you guys all again so very much. Make sure anyone who's watching, thank you all for watching. You can find the video
Thanks, guys.
on YouTube. We're here every Friday, and absolutely do not miss out on checking us out again next week, and don't miss out on Thomas's Instagram, Thomas's Facebook, all that great stuff.
Thank you very much.
Amazing work.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much, and we will see you all next week.
So long, everybody.
Stay safe.